Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Really hope that you've actually had a good morning so far, and I'm glad to actually be joined by the three amigos here. So what I thought I'd actually sort of kick off, and I guess the focus on this panel is, how do we really start to move the needle from procuring, even using technology, infrastructure inside your own environments, and simply moving away from that whole like for like. You know, this is the way that we used to do it with our old incumbent solution, so let's just keep on doing the exact same thing. And many times, if you think about it, the risk landscape, or the threat landscape itself changes. The risk model for an organisation changes. So what we're going to go through is really try and work out, how do you start to get some quick wins in your own organisation? But I'll start off with Dave. I guess I'll throw the gauntlet to yourself first. Sure. You know, how do you actually get some of those quick wins in your own business? How do you start to move forward from, you know, this is the way that we used to do it, so let's keep on doing it the same way?
Well, one of the best ways that I've found to move this forward is come up with a short-term plan. So everyone's aware of where you want to go, where you need to get to, and those like-for-like questions are coming out, and how they don't kind of end up in your plan. So one of the good ways to avoid that is to get everyone on board with that plan and move across. So, yeah.
Right. And if you think about it in the wild, wild west of a university, Steve, how do you actually make that change happen, especially when you've got constant change, not only from, you know, the threats that are out there, you've got, you know, thousands upon thousands of uni students that are coming in that are challenging, you know, everything that you're trying to sort of do. And not just simply from a technology standpoint, but how do you also change that from a people and a process aspect as well?
I think the people and process is probably the hardest thing. You know, we can throw technology at it. Everyone can do that. If you're sort of stripping out like for like and implementing, it really means you've either, your business hasn't changed, your organisation hasn't changed, or you as IT, and particularly security, haven't changed, which is really missing the mark on how the world is really operating. When you're looking at the people, a lot of it's education, you know, oxymoron being in education, but it's around that awareness. We're trying new ways to do that. I personally, you know, like to think of the use of like electroshock therapy, particularly for security, but it's driving that innovation and engagement.
Cool. So Dan, right at the end there, what's been some of the, I guess, the successes or wins that you've had, especially trying to, I guess, garner support as well? Because many times, you know, a project could be stood up to say, okay, we're going to change the infrastructure that we've got, and there's a certain amount of budget that you've actually got to play with. Yeah. But ultimately, how do you start to, I guess, what are some of those things that you can do to convey that up to the exec team to turn around and go, guys, we can't do that same. Yep. You know, how do you start to move from, you call it phase 1 to phase 2?
Yep. So I think if you've got a security program, you're looking to move your posture forward, you're looking to improve. So doing like for like is not always going to achieve that. And if you're looking at like for like, you're also missing some opportunity to consolidate. You can actually save costs. So if you're replacing like for like legacy technology with the same technology, these days there's a lot of multi-function type devices. You can actually save cost if you look at it more strategically.
Okay. So let me put the question out there. If you think about from, I guess for 12 years now, we've been talking about the next generation firewall, we've been talking about the fact of, you know, focusing on the user, the application, the content. And I guess one of the key things that sort of really underpins a lot of that is the user ID and app ID functionality. You know, Dave, from your world, looking at both an IT and an OT perspective, where do you start? You know, right now, if I think about most organisations, let's call it on the corporate side, corporate IT side, probably have about 300 to 400 applications. You know, where would you start? What would be the first app to look at? What would be the first 10 that you'd start to think, what's that process?
Yeah, we're looking at two areas at the moment. So our IT/OT border and our main data center segmentation firewall. So we elected to go for the easier option, which was the lower amount of traffic, less number of applications, kind of more defined traffic around the IT/OT border. So so we knew what traffic is heading through there, basically what the rule set was and what the applications were, who the users are, and in that case there may not be any users, and take a slowly approach to getting that into use and getting some confidence around how it works and then moving on with that.
Okay. And then what would be kind of the next step once you've actually sort of defined, let's call it some of the easier protocols or the easier type of applications that are out there? What would be some of the, I guess, that next steps? How do you start to, I guess, do that balancing act? Maybe from a people standpoint, not just simply from the technology aspect.
Oh, that's a challenge we've got right now. We're just in the start of doing our data center firewalls at the moment, and we're working through what are the easy things that everyone uses that everyone understands what they are. Trying to take it from a point of view of what's the low-hanging fruit, what's the easy things to do first, without trying to get through the super complicated.
Okay. So what would you consider to be a bigger challenge that you need to sort of work through?
So the more bespoke applications that we have internally, they're probably the really difficult things that aren't really well defined, that we have a lot of knowledge about. But the really simple things, Outlook, email, Exchange, those kind of things, they're pretty straightforward.
Awesome. So Dan, let's call it from a people and processes element, what are some of the big things that you found, really sort of shine out in terms of, some of those quick steps or the first steps that you should really sort of embark on when trying to move away from kind of the old way of doing things, but then also starting to leverage, I guess, a lot more of the capability and functionality that we've actually got in the platform?
I guess for us, one of the strategies that we've got is to sort of leverage some of the business projects. So where there's business change happening, so it might be re-platforming, might be an office move, we've integrated our security program into those projects. So where there's new or opportunities for user training, user awareness, we build security into that. And I guess we found that to be a quite successful strategy.
Right. So on the security awareness side of it, what's changed? If I think about many years ago, like probably every single person here, they've actually gone through some form of security awareness training itself, where it's just next, tick the box, and you're compliant. Yep. And we all know that obviously compliance doesn't equal security. What have you actually seen transition, and also what are some of those things that you've actually seen work quite well? But then also, conversely, what are some of the downsides of things that you've tried haven't really worked out either?
So I think phishing's a good example that we can all relate to. We have technology in place to prevent that, but without people and processes, it's still quite a threat. Again, with phishing, there are opportunities to sort of test the behaviour of the user base, and then have targeted training. So that's probably something that we haven't been able to do before, more traditionally. So, it's quite an easy way to see where there is more training required in the organisation.
Yep.
It's a good lunchtime activity for us. The guys from Swinburne will know what I'm talking about when we sit there, have our lunch and just sit there, watch the simulator keep going and how many people we're capturing. But from our perspective, what we've done and what's changed is the old traditional model of perimeter protection. Organisations now, the perimeter is your end user. It's us, everyone in the room as well. So how do you start educating them individually on what it means to the organisation and what is the risk? And starting to look from those, we started dissecting those from a compromised insider view, because our users are our biggest threat, so to speak. So whether you're an accidental insider because of poor business processes, lack of education, understanding of what's expected to you, or thinking you're doing your best in according to no framework, all the way to a compromised insider and a malicious insider, and identifying what that means to us and using clear examples has worked really well.
Okay. So that's a good point. You sort of mentioned one of the words, framework. Using a framework like this, does it actually help you go through that transformational steps to work out, what are the things I should work on first, second, third, like to help you out from a priority standpoint, obviously around risk priorities as well? Who's had success in, I guess, adopting frameworks or leveraging frameworks to actually sort of achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those fundamental 101s that you need to have in place. So coming into the university where we're really good at IT security, great technically, but we had no way to measure and manage that appropriately. And I'm talking about measurement from how are we doing and what are we doing well and where are those gaps, as opposed to just a compliance tick in the box, albeit that is quite important as well. So we've adopted a few frameworks. So we use ISO 27K as the management system. So how do you manage this? How do you provide assurance and governance around your security controls? But the controls that we've really embraced are the ASD, Essential 8, as well as the rest of their controls. And from those, we risk assess them. What matters us as a university as opposed to another organisation are quite different. So we align that to be able to talk to the organisation, not just as IT people, and have those conversations on what it means to us. And more importantly, when I joined, there was a lack of a framework as such, and I like to sort of use euphemisms, and a framework to me was like your children playing in a play park. You have your sand pit, You let your children do what they want. They're protected by the borders. As soon as they walk away from there, you need to have that insight and guidance. So if they're moving towards a swing, you move them away so they don't get hit. When they climb, you move closer to catch them when they fall, not if they fall. And when I joined the university, our sand pit was the Simpson Desert. So again, how do you actually guide somebody when you can see sand all the way through to the horizon?
That's a good
I
point.
think you touched on it there around measurement. I think that's quite important as well. So having a framework's one thing. That's my recommendation. Pick a framework. Doesn't matter what it is. There's plenty out there. But measure, like understand where you are, understand where you want to get to, and your progress along the way, because it does open up that conversation at all levels. So it might be the techie doing the work. He understands what he's part of, the bigger picture, but also it's quite an easy conversation with execs when you're showing progress and a target state.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to be able to show that progress and how you're tracking along that journey. Also, we'll answer some of the questions you get from the board from time to time around how are we doing, how are our competitors doing, how's the industry doing, those kind of things.
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting one, especially when you're trying to work out, kind of where you are, where you want to get to. And to that effect, it's all around how do you actually measure success? And I think we even sort of talked about this sort of just before around, what does a win look like? And if I think about sort of from a metric standpoint, and when I say we, everyone in the security industry usually tends to struggle to convey metrics about what success actually is. Many times I've heard people talk about the fact that they will go into a board meeting or they'll talk to their executive team and they'll say, we've had 100,000 virus detections last month. And you go, okay, so if you have 90,000 next month, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that's really focused on that lagging indicator. What are some good ways to really measure, I guess, what a win looks like from a leading indicator perspective? What are you actually seeing, success look like, Dave, at Powercor?
So we're trying to use capability or maturity as one of those measures at the moment. It's not perfect, but it's something that people seem to understand and get an idea around. So we're using this CSF for most of our kind of measurement and discussion with the board, so they understand the, identify, protect, detect, those kind of ideas. And moving forward in those areas is seen as we're improving our capability.
Yep.
There's still some questions around, okay, well, when we get to the top, what does that mean? So it's not perfect, but it's a good indicator.
And what does the end state look like?
Well, it's a great question. It's a really great question.
There is no end state in security.
Absolutely.
So we measure multiple ways and report to the board and university council. I've always said that if we start talking around speeds and feeds and the amount of viruses detected, we're losing the mark on what we're trying to achieve. But we're also losing the value conversation for that critical link between the business and IT and security, which is a bit of a black art according to them. So we'll report on near misses, but everything we report on clearly articulates back to how we're reducing the risk, what are we doing about reducing the risk, and that's mapped to the university's strategic risks. So therefore we have that conversation of we know why we're here and we know how to get there and what we're doing to achieve that.
Yeah.
I think for us we use the NIST CSF for measuring. I think it's important to have both like leading and lagging indicators as well. Like it's a really hard mix to get right. But in terms of what is a win, I guess from my perspective is if security is considered across all business processes, then that's a win. It's something very difficult to measure, and it shouldn't be a cumbersome activity. But if that mindset changes, I think that's a win from my perspective.
Yeah. How do you actually go from, I guess, from a cultural aspect? Because many times, and to the point that pretty much all three of you made, it's all around, many people think it's a black art. They see, well, that's IT's problem. They're the ones that are sort of handling it right now, or go and buy yet another box, and that's going to, solve the challenge as well. How do you change that, I guess, the cultural element where everyone's got a part to play? And I guess, what have you guys actually seen that enables you to sort of transform the way that you've done that before, where every single person here has got a job to play, whether you are the person that opens the door, puts the lights out at the end of the day, you run payroll, you're, in finance, whatever it may be. How do you change that?
Yeah, we're lucky in a way that we have a really good health and safety culture and being an electricity distribution utility. So that's really important. Every meeting starts with a health and safety moment. We've included a lot of those messages in that. So we include cybersecurity in health and safety as part of that. So it kind of gets that message out there that everyone's involved. It's a responsibility of everyone to be involved in that. That's been a really good start to get that moving. We've only started that recently, but it's been a really good response to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we look at sort of situational awareness inside is really key, even from a change management perspective. We've got quite a strong change management arm within the organisation. It's very much more difficult in a university, I must say. Coming out of banking and finance and defence, where it's very regimented, you have a level of authority to now working in a world of academia where these people are really intelligent. A lot of them have written their own code. They do research in areas including like cybersecurity. How do you influence them when they are really, really smart at what they do? So it's really a constant engagement, it's a constant negotiation, but taking them on the journey is the most important part that I found, that once they actually come on the journey with you, that they understand what you're trying to achieve and they understand their place. So with the university, we've got sort of these different worlds, as you said, the Wild West. We've got these lovely students that we try to teach around cyber safety, let alone cyber security as a course, making them understand, they are a critical point into our organisation. We have our corporate services, so finance, HR, all of those things that we tend to have a higher level of acceptance because they actually understand. And then you've got the areas of education where your job is to actually disseminate information. So how do you actually teach them to secure it? And it's really understanding what they're trying to achieve, how that maps into the organisation strategically, and then how you can support them.
Yeah. For us, we've gone down the enterprise risk path. So I guess the different divisional areas need to consider cyber risk in their risk registers. So we're happy to help, but we push back the responsibility to the system owners, to the data owners, to assess risk. And part of that, the answer might be they don't know how to do it. So we are there as a security team to assist with that. We found that quite successful.
And do you get pushback? Obviously, many people are always resistant to change. I think it's human nature as well. We don't really like change. How do you there's always going to be the many blockers that are out there, sometimes, which is actually quite funny considering they think that security is the department of no. How do you change the blockers? I think especially from an academic standpoint, Steve, how do you change the mindset of an academic that feels that they know the answer to everything?
I'm glad there's no HR representatives. I always like to think electroshock therapy can work and will work. It's difficult actually, and we had, as a good example, a faculty that had on their own wiki page 10 steps to circumvent security and IT. And step number 1 was do not call the service desk unless your PC's physically on fire. And it takes you through these systematic steps that when you get to step 10, it go back to step 1. So it's really engaging with them and understanding what they're trying to achieve and how you can support them is really critical. And even then, you still get a lot of pushback. So we try not to say no, we try to actually engage and innovate. And what we found successful is finding our little poster children within certain faculties and areas where they as a peer converse with each other as well. And therefore, people start realising that, the security team aren't that bad at all.
I don't envy your role.
No, not at all.
For us, we found, when it's the no department, it's often the no department because you're considered at the very last minute. We found a successful way, if you're engaged early, you might just be an advisory role, a consulting role, involved in projects or whatever's happening in the business quite early on. Even if it's just an observer, we find that quite a good strategy to be engaged and make those decisions up front rather than the day of go live type thing.
Yeah, and I think the more you do that, the more that continues to build your reputation and get you further along the path. So I think both of those approaches work really well.
Yeah, it becomes names and faces and those sorts of things as well. The relationships are built, and you sort of not behind the scenes anymore.
Yeah, it comes back to that people thing in security. A lot of times it really is about the people, and those relationships are what are going to give you the success in the long run.
Yeah, look, I think the other element as well that everyone always needs to be cognizant of is we've got to set the tone from the top. And I guess one of the things that's actually worked in many organisations that I've seen is when you start to get the executives playing the role of, some of those role models or some of those individuals that people can actually relate to, they can resonate and say, oh, look, they're actually, they've got the good cyber ethics, so to speak. They're doing the right thing. So, one thing that we always do is we tend to look up to our leaders. So if they can instill the good values and show that to everyone else, then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I should do the same thing as them. So let me just sort of shift a little bit of gears in terms of sort of like different models, different types of security models. And the one that always comes up to mind is always around cloud. For years, many of you have basically been trying to sort of protect the borders, the perimeters of your own organizations, but then we start to adopt, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, where, people say the perimeter is dead. I just say you've got perimeters. And, to your point, Steve, the perimeter is your user. What changes at that point? So when you think about transforming your security program, you've also got your entire business is transforming as well. So what have you actually seen work, or what changes that you need to be thinking about when adopting cloud in general?
I think Michael this morning hit the nail on the head with his conversation with the Prime Minister. It's actually supply chain and managing the supply chain risk. So what we've done in the organisation is we understand where our data is, to have that situational awareness. What is that data according to a risk profile? Is it PII? Is it sort of, research information that's commercially in confidence or just about to come out with a trademark or commercialised? And then really risk assess that provider. So we lead with our statement of applicability. Those control objectives and principles are quite, I wouldn't say loose, but they're very clear on what we're trying to achieve. So we work with each of those suppliers to identify how they meet those objectives, and then we put them into our assurance program. So if you're a higher risk vendor, based on the information that you process or hold for us, we may audit you on a 6-12 month basis, all the way down to a moderate risk one or a lower risk one, where we may come and see you every 2 years and just continue that activity. And most importantly, out of those two with the supply chain, is continue the conversation. Always talk to them, always collaborate with them. Organisations change. I mean, you've seen the amazing stuff that Palo Alto is bringing out already in the application stack and how that's going to change. So understanding that and where that fits into your organisation is really important.
I don't think it's not all negative with clouds. We've found that some of the security tools that come with a SaaS solution or IaaS solution weren't financially or technically viable previously. So there's some great dashboards, some great alerts correlated with threat intelligence that we just didn't have access to before.
Absolutely.
What about yourself, Dave? What have you actually seen from a transformation when it comes to cloud?
So we haven't really gone a big way down cloud just as yet. I mean, a lot of our stuff's still out in the street, so we can't really clarify that. But certainly we're starting to see a little bit of a move to cloud, but not a lot yet. Okay.
So last question to the three amigos, and I guess the last sort of takeaway item as well. So I'll start with yourself, Dan, but if there's two things that everyone in the audience should be thinking about after this session, going back to their offices tomorrow and really try and implement, what are two sort of solid things that you would probably say, this is something that you should be doing right now, if you're not, or at least thinking about changing that conversation and transforming the way that we actually do security?
Yeah, from a program perspective, I think the two pieces of advice would be able to measure. So again, go back, pick a framework, understand where you are and where you want to get to. It opens up the conversations at all levels. And secondly, if you can integrate your program into corporate strategy, it's going to be successful. So in practice, that might mean leveraging business projects. It might be joint security business projects, but integrate into that corporate strategy where you can.
Awesome. Steve?
Apart from electroshock therapy, I think I've got this passion for it.
You're loving that.
I'd love to, Look, I think ultimately, the first thing you need is situational awareness. You need to understand what's occurring within your network and how that meets the needs of the organisation. With that comes a lot of activities and work that you need or should be doing to achieve. But then realistically looking at, and as you've explained too, is aligning it to the ERM or enterprise risk management, because what that allows you to do is talk business. The moment you can talk business, they're going to get it from a risk perspective. It's not about speeds and feeds. It's not about, you know, a box sitting there. That to a business person is a sunken cost. So the better you can align to that, the business, the more successful it is.
Awesome.
I think the important thing is be persistent, keep going, particularly in those like-for-like conversations. You know, just keep going. If you lose one, okay. If you've lost one, keep going. I think that's really important. I think we're not always going to win those arguments, but we need to keep going and just make sure we win the next one.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a key.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you to the three amigos.
Thank you.